Well, hello there, listeners, and welcome back. My name is Stephanie Safarian, and you're listening to episode 357 of Sustainable Minimalists, a twice-ish weekly show about intentional and eco-minimalist living. On today's show, we're discussing all things TerraCycle. What is TerraCycle? Does it actually recycle our stuff? And is it worth the money, especially for those zero-waste boxes? I'm also answering listener Laura's question. Laura wrote to me and she said that, she buys the TerraCycle boxes, she sends her stuff in, and she wants to know if she's wasting her money. Does TerraCycle actually properly dispose of the items she puts in the box? She knows that TerraCycle has been in the news a lot lately for their lack of truly recycling, potentially. She wants me to get to the bottom of it. So we are getting to the bottom of it today. Before we do all that, let's just all get on the same page with what TerraCycle is. Maybe you've heard a little something about them. Maybe you know they have something to do with recycling. Well, TerraCycle collects hard-to-recycle items and recycles them for us. In an interview, I heard the CEO, Tom Zaki, say that his mission is to eliminate the concept of garbage. Wow, what a big, lofty goal, right? If you have never heard of TerraCycle before, first of all, where have you been? There's a reality TV series all about TerraCycle. It's called Human Resources. In 2021, TerraCycle was named both one of Time 100's most influential companies and one of Fast Company's most innovative. So if you haven't heard of TerraCycle before, don't worry, I've got you. I'll get you up to speed today. Before we talk about TerraCycle, let's talk about its founder, Tom Zaki, because I think he has a pretty interesting story. He was born in Hungary. He immigrated to Canada, the Toronto area, by the way, after the Chernobyl disaster. So when he was a young boy, he grew up in Toronto. And he says that he became fascinated with the concept of recycling after seeing all the astounding things people were throwing in the garbage. The first time he ever saw a television, he saw it being thrown into the garbage. And so this sparked an interest in him. Tom Zaki started TerraCycle in 2001. He was a student at Princeton. He was transforming leftover cafeteria food waste into fertilizer. That was the first iteration of TerraCycle. He's since dropped out of Princeton and tweaked the company. In 2007, TerraCycle began brand-sponsored recycling programs, and we'll talk about those in a minute. I'm talking drink pouches, energy bar wrappers, all those really hard-to-recycle items. Nobody wanted them. Tom Zaki did. In 2019, TerraCycle launched Loop, and we're going to talk about Loop a little bit today, but Loop is the reuse program in which companies can package their stuff in reusable containers, and then we give them back to the company, okay? Now, what is TerraCycle best known for? Well, it's best known in 2023 for its mail-in recycling programs. Some are free and some cost money, like the one listener Laura alluded to. And we're going to talk about all of them today. Let's start first with the free ones. The free ones on the TerraCycle website are called sponsored waste programs. If you've never gone to the TerraCycle website, and you are at a computer right now, go. Just do it while I'm talking. I highly suggest it. The sponsored waste programs are free for you and me, the consumer. They're free. It's as easy as signing up for free on TerraCycle.com and printing out a shipping label. So you get a box that you already have in your home. You fill it with something, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then you tape it up, put the shipping label on, and you send it off. It's that easy. Now, there's dozens of free programs, and I'm highlighting this one because I'm from Massachusetts and everybody drinks Dunkin' Donuts, but there's a Dunkin' Donuts coffee bags program. So you find a box you already have. Over time, you fill it with those Dunkin' Donuts coffee bags, and then you send it. There's a Bic pens one where you can add in Bic pens, Bic glue sticks, watercolor palettes. Send that in. There's another one for Colgate. So any Colgate product like toothpaste tubes, the plastic packaging that your toothbrush comes in, your toothbrush can all go in a box and you send that off. How about those Go-Go squirt pouches that little kids like? It has to be that brand, Go-Go squirts, but you know, those I think they're like applesauce packets. Kids suck up the applesauce and then you're stuck with this single-use disposable piece of packaging. You can collect those and send them to TerraCycle. How about old plastic Ziploc containers? I'm not talking necessarily the bags. I'm talking about the plastic Tupperware, right? The Ziploc brand. You can send those in. That is all free. And there are dozens of sponsored waste opportunities. I definitely encourage you to check them all out and participate if you can. Now, there's one major caveat here, and that is that many of the programs have wait lists. And many of the wait lists are really darn long. So if you use, I don't know, let's say Garnier Fructis products in your hair, and you've always used them and you have no plans of changing, I suggest you hop on that wait list so that when a place becomes available for you, so you're saving all your Garnier Fructis packaging now, you're just putting them in a corner in your house. And then when you get the notification that a spot has opened up for you in this free sponsored waste program, you can send all your stuff straight to TerraCycle. Now, you're probably wondering, well, who pays for this? Recycling is not free. We've got to ship it somewhere. We've got to sort it. Then we actually have to do something with the waste. Who pays for it? This is the beauty of the sponsored waste programs, in my opinion. The corporation pays for it. So Dunkin' Donuts pays for it, or Garnier Fructis pays for it, or Bic pays for it, or Colgate, or Go-Go Squirts. So they're paying for their packaging to get properly recycled, and they are basically outsourcing that to TerraCycle. In return, they get a fancy little logo on their products. The logo essentially states that their packaging is recyclable by TerraCycle. It's a green label. It looks like a combination of the infinity symbol and a recycling triangle. And I just need to pause here and say that that logo has immense marketing value, doesn't it? I mean, even if you have no idea what that symbol looks like, and you pick up two products, one has this logo, this fancy looking logo, and one doesn't, you pick up two toothpastes, let's say, even the most eco-unconscious amongst us would likely pick the one with the logo on it because it looks important. It looks fancy, right? So the logo has a lot of clout, if you will. So I love the idea that companies and corporations are paying for their product packaging to be responsibly managed. I will say here too, though, it's not as though these plastic packaging products are perfectly recycled into new packaging. That's really not what's happening here. Let's take Burt's Bees as an example. They make the chapstick, right? It's not as if you fill a box full of chapstick containers and send it to TerraCycle. They're going to clean the tubes and send them back to Burt's Bees for refilling. That's not what's happening here. That would be a closed loop system. And this part of TerraCycle is not closed loop. Those Burt's Bees containers will be sorted, shredded, washed, melted, and then essentially downcycled into something else like plastic flakes or plastic pellets, which make outdoor furniture, let's say. So it's not a closed loop system. I want to make that perfectly clear. I also want to make clear too that TerraCycle is not doing the recycling itself. Instead, TerraCycle contracts out the recycling to third-party facilities. And we're going to talk about that in the second part of today's conversation. So that's the sponsored waste program. A company or corporation is paying for the recycling of its packaging, and it's free to you, the consumer. Again, check out TerraCycle's website. There's programs for Black & Decker, Calphalon, Colgate I mentioned, Garnier I mentioned, Nordstrom, Rubbermaid, Swiffer, Teva. Like I could go on and on. Lots of programs there. The second option that TerraCycle has is the one that listener Laura referred to in her question, and that's the zero waste box. It's one that the consumers pay for. The zero waste box is another mail-in program, and its cost varies depending on a bunch of things, but the cost varies from between $95 a box all the way up to $528 a box. That money's coming out of your pocket. It depends on the size of the box, what's inside the box, etc. You can buy an all-in-one box where you throw in whatever you want into the box, mostly. You don't put in hazardous waste, of course, but almost everything could go in the box. That would be an all-in-one box. Or if you have very specific recyclables, or hard to recyclables, I should say, you could buy that specific box. So you could buy a zero waste candy wrapper box and you fill that box with candy wrappers. Or an action figures box. If you have a lot of action figures, nobody wants them. You can't do anything else with them, but you don't want to see them go to the landfill. You could buy the action figures box. Or there's a baby gear box if you're no longer in the stage of life in which you're having babies. So those are the zero waste boxes. According to their website, after a customer mails in one of these zero waste boxes, this is what they do with the contents of the box. They sort it first. Plastics are separated by number and melted down into pellets. Metals are separated by type and smelted into metal sheeting or bar stock, whatever bar stock is. I don't even know what that is. Glass is cleaned and sorted by color. It's then crushed and melted to make new glass. Natural fiber textiles like cotton are turned into insulation. Synthetic fiber textiles like polyester are made into pellets. You can put in electronics. You could even put in cooking oil. How about cigarette butts, latex paints? All of this can go to TerraCycle if you're willing to pay for it. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh my goodness, sounds great, but what about the shipping of all this stuff? So stuff's shipped to you, then you're shipping it to TerraCycle, then TerraCycle's shipping it to these third-party vendors. Sounds like a lot of shipping. A lot of shipping sounds like a lot of carbon emissions. Yeah, that would be right. However, to maximize the use of these sponsored waste programs and zero waste boxes, you can make your own home a drop-off point so that other people can utilize the program. This can allow the carbon costs associated with shipping to be lowered since people would be shipping individual boxes. As an example here, one woman in the United Kingdom has recycled over 2,000 pounds of what would have been trash by setting up her garden as a drop-off point for multiple sponsored waste programs. Interesting. Okay, so this sounds all pretty good, right? We can get rid of whatever we need to get rid of guilt-free. Or is it? Well, let's wait a minute. Is recycling and in many cases, downcycling our waste just a Band-Aid? Shouldn't we be halting the production of these single-use disposable packaging products so that fossil fuels are not used to create the products in the first place? Because as a friendly reminder, just so we're all on the same page, fossil fuels are pulled from the earth and burned to create plastic. And when we're burning fossil fuels, we're emitting carbon into the atmosphere. And when we're emitting excess carbon into the atmosphere, we're contributing to global warming. And global warming is a major driver behind climate change. A common criticism of TerraCycle is that it basically allows major corporations to greenwash their products. And CEO Tom Zaki agrees and admits that the best way to create less plastic waste is to produce less plastic in the first place. That is why TerraCycle started Loop, which uses refillable containers. Now, we have to talk about Loop for a minute, even though it doesn't have to do with listener Laura's question. I believe it came out in 2019, and it was rolled out in my location here in Massachusetts in 2020, and it was amazing. It was expensive, but it was amazing. Basically, I went on the website, I ordered some stuff. Like, I'll use the example. One thing that really stuck in my mind was Haagen-Dazs ice cream in a stainless steel container. So it came to my door, I ate the ice cream, and then I cleaned out the container and sent it back. They did that with shampoo and, I mean, you name it. It was amazing. However, they've changed the business model. And now if you go to the Loop page on TerraCycle's website, you will see that the Loop program has been drastically scaled back. Currently here in the United States, it's operating in an extremely limited capacity in Washington, D.C. and Missouri. And that's about it. So the program has changed an awful lot in 2 years. I did do a little bit of a deep dive into, well, what happened? Why this sudden change? And all I could find was that Loop has lost millions of dollars since its inception. But I bring all this up to say that, yeah, recycling is a Band-Aid. The real thing that needs to happen here is the closed loop system. And so I'm sad to see that loop, isn't growing and is instead being scaled back. We're going to take a break, but when we get back, we are going to discuss whether TerraCycle actually recycles our trash. That's the big question, right? Because if TerraCycle is just putting our stuff in landfills, well, what the heck is the point? We're going to get there after a quick sponsor break. Oh my goodness, guys and gals. Electric bikes have officially entered the chat. And even though you might not typically think of using an e-bike for running errands, the all-new Expedition by Lectric is the cargo e-bike designed to carry more. So whether you're packing up your groceries or your gear or your library books or even your child, the Expedition has you covered. I live in the SUV-filled suburbs, and I have been trying so darn hard to reduce my reliance on my car. Enter my new electric e-bike. No fossil fuels to burn. I get some exercise and some fresh air, winning all around. And if you're wondering about cost, Lectric's e-bikes can be financed for as low as $133 per month. Visit lectricebikes.com to learn more about the Expedition Cargo e-bike and all of the other sweet models Lectric has to offer. That's LECTRIC ebikes.com. If you consider yourself a sustainable minimalist, you already know that what you eat matters. That's why I'm proud to partner with Green Chef, the only certified organic meal kit company. Now, I'll admit, I was skeptical. I'm not a fan of the waste in most of these meal kits, but I was happy to learn that Green Chef is the only meal kit that offsets 100% of its carbon footprint and 100% of the plastic in every box. There is some plastic inside for food safety reasons, but the box insulation is plant-based and lots of what's inside is also made from 100% post-consumer waste. Now, if you're wondering how the food tastes, that's really darn good. Think seasonal and organic produce. If you know cooking from scratch is best, but sometimes you need a little help, Green Chef's got you. Go to greenchef.com/sustainable60 and use code sustainable60 to get 60% off plus free shipping. That's greenchef.com/sustainable60. Here at Sustainable Minimalists, we are all about decluttering and spring cleaning and organizing our spaces. This spring, it's totally possible to take care of not only our homes, but also our mental health at forhers.com. At forhers.com, you can get access to real medical providers who can prescribe trusted anxiety and depression medication if it's right for you. The process is 100% online, including unlimited check-ins, provider messaging, and support along the way. And to make things even simpler, you can get your first month of treatment for just $25 if prescribed. To get started, go to forhers.com/spring. That's forhers.com/SPRING. Offer only available if prescribed. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Subscription required. Additional restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information. And we're back on today's show. We are discussing TerraCycle. Before the break, we talked about their various boxed programs. We talked about their sponsored waste programs and their zero waste boxes. We also touched lightly on Loop, which is their closed loop initiative. Now we're on to the burning question, Laura's burning question, my burning question, the question we all want answered, which is, does TerraCycle actually recycle our stuff? Well, let me start by saying that TerraCycle is often and very frequently praised as being an innovator that is doing everything in its power to get plastic producers to consider the real cost of the waste they're creating. And here's the key, in my humble opinion, and to take some financial responsibility for the waste that their products are just throwing out into the world. I do not think that we should discount this. This is huge. Corporations create the single-use packaging. We buy it, and then the corporations just wash their hands of it, put their hands up and say, hey, all this waste, it's your problem. It's not ours. You bought it, so it's yours. So I applaud TerraCycle for what it's doing to make these corporations take financial responsibility for the pollution that they're creating. Let's just take a minute and pause there, because that's really darn critical. Now let's move on to, well, is TerraCycle actually doing what it says it's doing? Is it actually recycling our junk? I have 3 important things to say about this. Recently, and you may have heard something about this in the news, 30 bales of TerraCycle's trash was found near an incineration site in Bulgaria. If you're wondering what was in these bales, it was chip bags and cat food pouches, if you're wondering. So TerraCycle promises to never incinerate the stuff that's sent to them. However, 30 bales of TerraCycle trash that you and I dutifully sent in was found near an incineration site in Bulgaria. The CEO, Tom, my boy Tom, says that the bales ended up in Bulgaria due to human error at a third-party processing facility. The bales were put on the wrong truck, human error. Everybody makes mistakes. So that's one. Number 2, in October 2022, Bloomberg News did a little investigation of their own. A reporter placed traceable tags, so 3 traceable tags on 3 different items and sent them all to TerraCycle. One was put on an apricot food pouch, one was put on a Gerber baby food pouch, and one was put on some bubble wrap. The bubble wrap tracker ended up at a plastic recycling facility. The apricot food pouch tracker, which went in one of those sponsored waste boxes, stopped tracking at a waste transfer station. So it's unclear if it was recycled or, I don't know, put in a landfill. It's unclear. And the tracker on the Gerber baby food pouch. So again, the reporter used one of those sponsored boxes, free to her. Gerber's paying for it. So she put a tracker on a Gerber baby food pouch, and that did end up in a landfill. Now, again, my boy Tom, he has an explanation for this, and he explained that Gerber does not pay to recycle any metal. And the tracker was made of metal, of course, right? And so because the tracker was not part of the Gerber pouch, that's why it went into the landfill. He's essentially arguing that just because the tracker went to the landfill, that does not mean that the pouch also went to the landfill. They're sorting these items. So again, more unclear results there. Now, there is a lawsuit as well, right? The Last Beach Cleanup in March of 2021, it's an organization, sued TerraCycle for a bunch of reasons. Basically, they argue that because of the long wait list for the sponsored waste programs, you can't label items as recyclable if you can't get off the wait list. That was one issue. They also argue that the shipment of all these boxes here, there, and everywhere, that is not great for carbon emissions whatsoever. And then their final argument was essentially that the mailback recycling business model encourages companies to continue their same polluting practices. It's not changing anything significant, right? It's a Band-Aid. The lawsuit was settled in November of 2021. TerraCycle agreed to a bunch of changes, the biggest ones being that TerraCycle agreed to change its product labels, and the company also agreed to implement a supply chain certification program. Okay, so a couple things to think about here. Number 1, TerraCycle has been in business in the recycling of plastic business since about 2007, right? 2007, it's now 2023, and there have only been 2 instances in which perhaps some things weren't recycled appropriately. 2 instances out of the enormous amounts of waste that we're sending to TerraCycle. 2 instances does not sound like that much, and it does not sound to me like that's enough evidence to throw up our hands and say TerraCycle is a scam. Doesn't sound that way to me at all. Even my boy Tom Zaki, he concedes that it is impossible to get the risk of stuff going to landfills or stuff getting burned to absolute zero, but he's trying. I will say, however, again, this is a Stephanie consideration, but TerraCycle zero waste boxes in particular are very expensive, in my opinion. Like, I am living well above the poverty line, and I still don't know if I personally am willing to spend $300 on a box to fill with my junk. That's a lot of money, and that's why I believe they're inaccessible to large portions of the population. And while their sponsored boxes are indeed free, and while I definitely am on board with making corporations pay for the waste they're creating, they have those long wait lists. And so they're inaccessible by design right now. Let's get to Laura's question. Laura specifically wanted to know if she's wasting her money on the zero waste boxes by TerraCycle. I say no. I say you're not wasting your money. If you were trying your best, Laura and everybody, to reduce the amount of trash you produce in the first place, and the boxes are within your budget, I don't consider them a waste. I consider you a thoughtful consumer and a conscientious citizen of this planet. So no, Laura, I do not think that it's a waste by any means, and I do not think that TerraCycle is a scam by any means. I do have a final word, however, and that is that we have a lot of really big environmental problems at the moment. They're all related, certainly, but they're also quite distinct. So I'm going to just rattle off a few of our problems. One, of course, is climate change. Another one is plastic pollution, and especially microplastic pollution. Another is overflowing landfills and the pollution that stems from things breaking down in the landfills. Another is exploitation of our finite resources like water and metals and fossil fuels. So those are some problems, but what is the umbrella that encompasses all of these problems? What is the umbrella theme to all of these problems? It, of course, is our consumption habits, and specifically our overconsumption. The only way to have less plastic waste is to produce less plastic in the first place. And that's why recycling must always be our last and final resort. Before we resort to recycling, we must first reuse. Before even reusing, we must first reduce. We must stop buying SHIT that we don't need. We must get back in touch with those self-sufficient skills that we need to survive on this planet so that we're not relying on corporations and their single-use packaging to do it for us. So I'm right back where I started with this podcast and its inception. The problem is not whether or not TerraCycle's sending our stuff to incineration centers. The problem is not whether corporations are greenwashing their products. The problem is that you and me are buying way too much stuff. Full stop. I know it's easier said than done. I know, like, oh, just stop buying stuff. I know that that is very pie in the sky and impractical advice. I'm living it right there with you. But that's why we're all here, right? We're all here to try to do better. And so if you're sending your hard to recycle items to TerraCycle, you are helping to solve the plastic pollution problem. Remember when I just listed off a bunch of problems? By sending your stuff to TerraCycle, you are helping to solve that problem. You're also doing your part to keep our landfills clear, right? You're solving another problem. You're doing your part to solve another problem. But sending your stuff to TerraCycle is not doing anything to help global warming. You could even make the argument that you're negligibly making it worse by shipping your TerraCycle stuff to wherever it needs to go. In my view, and the foundation on which this podcast sits, is that the solution to our problems, our environmental problems, and the way to stop shipping our TerraCycle boxes all around the world is to not have anything to fill those TerraCycle boxes with in the first place. Buy less stuff, buy only what you need, and only when you need it. So that's my show for today. Laura, I think I answered your question. If I didn't, let me know, but I hope I'm leaving all of you with some tangible takeaways, Show notes are at mamaminimalist.com/357. We will be back tomorrow with another headlines episode. Tomorrow, we're talking about bumblebees. We're talking about climate migrations. They're happening now, my friends. And we're also talking about a cool new iPhone feature that I think is pretty darn cool. So we'll get there tomorrow. Reach out if you need me. Send me an email. Reach out on socials. Leave the show a review. I read every single one, even the mean ones. I'll see you tomorrow, and take care.